Today's topic shall be somewhat heavier than usual. If you have been following my videos for long and closely enough, then you will know that I take Robocraft seriously as a game. I play all matches through to conclusion and I never surrender. This can lead to some interesting gameplay moments, but I can at times come off as being rather intense or even unfriendly or toxic, and the kind of toxicity that I engage in is predominantly that of salt. For almost as long as I've been playing Robocraft, I salted towards this or that subsection of the Robocraft player base. The subsection that I am best known for opposing would be those whom I call matchmaking exploiters, or what others call farmers. Generally higher ranked players stacked in a party such that the matchmaking system is less able to provide a fair match, and so it gifts them with lower ranked players or even more AIs on the opposition. These farmers, and I dislike calling them farmers because real farmers are hard-working, honest individuals, will tend to have optimized bot CPU levels, optimized bot types, optimized weapon upgrade levels, and more. So they're dealing more damage and everything. And they tend to breeze through whatever the half-baked opposition that the matchmaking system throws their way. Their rankings inflate and inflate and inflate, and for this reason the Robocraft leaderboards are significantly polluted with the usernames of matchmaking exploiters. However, I digress. These days I am increasingly well known for being heavily opposed to the way that the Robocraft Balance Patches server is operated. That server has had a fair number of highly dubious changes go through on their watch, the most notorious of which would have to be the buffing of helium health through no suggestion from, and in spite of heavy opposition from, the actual community that they purportedly represent. Other parts that have taken game worsening changes in the past year alone include, and by the way under their watch once again, but is not restricted to, chain guns, weapon energy module, EMP, lock-on missile launchers, and sprinter legs. Flags took a hit, but have been made playable again. Rudders were butchered in the past, but that was more than a year ago, and have taken other more positive changes also. The short of the matter is that I consider both matchmaking exploiters as well as the Balance Patches server to be an overall threat to the game, and while the appearance may be that they are both very different from each other, they share a common motive: the desire for control of the game at the expense of others. This they exercise in very different ways, and the motives of the former are far easier to discern than that of the latter. Matchmaking exploiters stack so as to try and ensure easier matches. It's as simple as that. And to be fair, the act of exploiting the matchmaking system is not a black and white affair. Some stacking is definitely worse than others. One of the more benign kinds of stacking would have to be the artbot stacking. Unfortunately, it is not usually clear to their opponents when this is the case, and so you will still occasionally see players quit the match, leaving the remaining team high and dry to fight an even harder match. Of course, artbots aren't the only way to stack in a party in a relatively ethical way. The size of the stack naturally makes a difference, as does the tier at which one stacks. As a general rule, the smaller the stack, the lower tier the stack, particularly tiers 3 and lower, the more benign the stack. However, the truth is that even 2 players in a party can skew matchmaking in their favor. It just doesn't happen quite as often as when 3 stacked, and that not quite as often as when 4 stacking, and that modestly less so than when in a full 5 stack. Whereas when it comes to the Balance Patches server, it just stands to reason that there has to exist some level at which a person entrusted to gatekeeping balance is not simply as a fox entrusted to guarding the henhouse, exploiting a very different kind of opportunity that FreeJam technically gave to the entire player base and not to a single individual in love with the power to change the game for better or worse. Not for any love for the game itself, but for that dopamine hit of holding an entire player base hostage to his sordid whims. One would have to hope that there is more to that individual than the callous cold indifference of a cat toying with a still breathing bird locked within its jaws. Hidden behind vacuous cat memes on a server that appears to just be there for the ride. Irrelevant opinions indeed. Unlike matchmaking exploiters, the balance patches server has a lot of potential for good. However, with that potential comes the potential for such to just as easily be used for bad, and the balance patches have become a series of what the server thinks it can continue to get away with. Or that's how it seems at times. I won't say they're that blatant. In spite of this heavily critical view, I do acknowledge that balancing is not a simple affair, it is downright complex, and it requires great consideration, including of the aspects that are unknown or otherwise unchangeable. It also requires a vision of what Robocraft needs to become. This vision is something that the Discord server has not shared. It doesn't even bother to explain the reasoning behind the changes that it pushes forward. It is what it is, and it is nowhere to be seen on the patch notes. The player base is left guessing as to what was going through their minds. I am aware that there are individuals who exist upon that server who may better be relied upon to speak on the game's behalf. However, the Helium experience alone should show that the sole proponent, pusher and rubber stamper of that change needs to be brought down a peg. Then perhaps one could anticipate balance refinements rather than balance rocking changes. Perhaps. However, that was quite the diversion from talking about the intensity, unfriendliness and toxicity, otherwise known as salt, that I engage in. So let me get back to that. The truth of the matter is that my emotional default is a toss-up between grimness and anger. I am capable of mirth, but such is a departure from my default state. When I enter a match, it is generally the case that my engines are firing on all cylinders, my aim is to perform, and a failure to perform is not acceptable to me. It is not really due to any expectation from other players for me to play to the level that I do in my videos. They aren't generally cherry-picked after all. It could certainly be mistaken for, or at least compared with, poor sportsmanship on my part. Losing is a part of any game, yet I am far less concerned with the loss itself and more concerned with the how, the why, and the to whom is involved. That is involved. I really dislike losing to matchmaking exploiters, as well as to a select few players whom have long since lost my respect, and yes, there are certainly overlaps between those two groups. I also admit that I resent taking losses in Robocraft due to team shortcomings, whether such be an allergy to sitting on the circles in Battle Arena or an incomprehensible need to feed opposition in team deathmatch. I can often feel my anger building, and that isn't quite ideal, but it does at the very least take a little time to do so. My default means of dealing with that pressure is to type rigorously in chat to try and get the players on the team to actually fulfill the basic needs of the game mode. As such, it can be pretty stressful to have a PathForger on a team if that PathForger thinks that something is lacking. I have long since come to the conclusion that a simple adjustment to post-matching ranking adjustments, such that personal performance in a match should take precedence over a mere team result. The current situation literally holds experienced players hostage to the actions of newer players, and this is not great for either party concerned. Fixing this won't necessarily eliminate angry messages to teammates, but it would remove this issue as a pillar of justification for it. Well, there you have it. PathForger is an angry player with strong opinions. Who knew? Before I close off and forget, thank you for recommending that I try the Pikachume Pognomme. It is a fairly sturdy and shooty mech, and it can certainly capture points if its player is so inclined. So, what are your thoughts? Did you know that I was angry, and how does this change your perspective of me, if at all? Are matchmaking exploiters as much of a threat to the game as I've been saying for years? Is the balance patches server an even bigger threat, or do I have them all wrong? Feel free to let me know your questions and thoughts, and I'll meet you down in the comments below. And of course, thank you for watching.